Okay, now we're recording. Thank you. So the question that one person asked, well, he actually asked two, but the first question was about how the people of Ukraine, and specifically, I guess you can only really speak for yourself, but you maybe have your ear to the ground also about the people, if you were having empathy, how you felt about the people, the situation in Gaza. And that's
Oh,
a
well,
tough one.
that's a very complex question that I often get asked on the channel. And my answer is I'm here to speak for Ukraine. My country is in the greatest war since the Second World War, at least for Europe, but I think on a global level. Dozens of thousands of people were killed in Mariupol, and from the satellite images, you can see the growing of the graves, of mass graves there. This week, a baby was killed, newly born, a mother, her 12-year-old daughter, and 6 month child. I somehow feel the world does not know enough about these things constantly happening in Ukraine. And my mission as Anna from Ukraine is to speak about that. And I kind of trust people who are experts on the ground. So I'm here in Kyiv, in Ukraine. I did not leave my country. And I want to speak about my people here.
Okay. Yeah, I understand that completely. And I actually agree with you that these things are happening every single day in Ukraine and it doesn't get near the publicity that the situation.
Not at all,
No, I
not at
know.
all. Because what we observe, human safari in Kherson, I would like to answer this question.
Yeah.
There are footages, tons of footages that some social media restrict with Russians hunting down people in Kherson, which was liberated. They cannot control the city, so they simply choose pensioners, children, railroad buses, and they trace them with drones from the Russian side.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of my country. And I believe we need to speak about this too, because another problem that comes together is people saying it's Putin's war. It would be very easy if it was Putin's war, because these guys who trace these children and hunt them with drones in Kherson, they are not Putin. They are young Russian soldiers who enjoy this. This is their choice. This is not an order actually coming from the Kremlin. That's their pastime.
Really. I know the drone. And listeners, if you haven't seen the oh, what is Galen's,
Kherson safari, if you want,
yeah.
human safari, that's how they call it. I
Yeah.
don't like this term, but that's how they call it.
Yeah, they do. So there is actually it's quite a bit of footage out
I'd
there.
appreciate if your listeners and people who care even check if they don't trust me this online, they can find the proof and then go out to support Ukrainian children, Ukrainian pensioners who go under such circumstances and stand firm for country. And not just country, but international world order. And I'm sure that lots of conflicts and wars that now appear in very different corners of the world are inspired by Putin's criminal actions and indifference of many international institutions that were actually responsible for the protection of the order.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's we're living in a really um interesting time as far as in time. The Chinese curse, may live in interesting times. Well, we're definitely living in a historic moment, all of us at this point. And I don't know. I don't really know how to look ahead and see a bright outcome, but I'm a naturally optimistic person and I think there has to be one. I mean, I am encouraged by the number of people that have been protesting here in the States, which is our only option at this point, and but it's just not just go ahead.
Important not to be observers, because what I see a lot of people in Russia, for example, they turned into observers. They describe themselves as apolitical whenever they encounter a problem, but then they are surprised to see this huge gasoline crisis, rising prices, almost frozen deposits, inflation. And somehow they stop being apolitical when these problems are delivered inside their country. So, to prevent such problems, it's super important to protect freedom, to protect the role of citizens in a country, and that's exactly what we do. And to tell you the truth, sometimes when I listen to stories of people who come from authoritarian countries, I feel happier to be Ukrainian, even in times of war, because we stand for what we value. We do not play, we name the things by their names. And it's a great privilege in these interesting times as you describe them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my personal opinion is that Ukraine is actually the very um, best example of a functioning democracy, even though you are having in the midst of a horrible war, the spirit and the support um, of your country and the government. And I don't know, I mean, I'm sure that there are some people in Ukraine that aren't supportive of what's going on, of Zelensky and your government, but I would assume that for the most part, people are very supportive. And I was wondering, that was another question that someone.
Yeah, I'd say 100% support our resilience against Russia. And in politics, it's pretty okay to have different views on, I don't know, legislation on ecology or legislation on education or some norms of trade, taxation. But even this political opposition that existed before the war, they put it on pause, and we all are united with each other, with president, with the parliament, with universities, with hospitals, with every institution, because our task right now is to defeat the evil, to survive as a country, to preserve not just our borders, but our culture, identity, our future. And if you you might have noticed that whenever Ukrainians are dissatisfied with something, we go out, we demonstrate it on the streets. But if we are not protesting against something, it means that we are okay and we understand now is the time to concentrate all of our efforts on defeating the evil. So all people are united. And we know more about Russia. We know more about what life is like on the temporarily occupied territories. And even inside this big Russian Federation, and we don't want such life. We know what we stand for. It's not just, some very, I'm sorry, primitive observers may say, what's the difference? What flag is outside your city council if you are alive? No, the difference is great. People get killed, people get tortured, people are not allowed to speak their language, people are not allowed to follow their religion, people are not allowed to change presidents at least every 5 or 10 years. We don't want to live the Russian way. That's why we protect us and we protect a lot of other European countries. And I'm happy to see that more and more of them, including their political leaders, come to understand this, that Putin is just a mad dog together with millions. Millions who support him.
Yeah.
Putin is the product of his population, not vice versa. In every tank, in every bomber, in every missile targeting system, there are lots of Russians. There are lots of Russians hunting Ukrainian pensioners with drones in Kherson. These are people who like it. These are people who leave comments cheering for more. And these are people who do not understand what's happening when war returns back to dozens of Russian regions. And to tell you the truth, now in 2025, we feel way more confident and way stronger than we were in 2022. And there are some very visible signals that Russia will soon uh, collapse.
And so what would some of those signals be?
Well, let's be like realistic. I will not exaggerate anything, but let's have a look at Russia in 2022 and Russia in 2025. How many air raid alerts did people experience in 2022 in Russia?
None.
None. How many of their military facilities, legitimate targets, were destroyed with Ukrainian drones and Ukrainian homemade missiles? None. Now, dozens of Russian regions are a war zone that were totally safe, with Ukrainian soldiers partially in Kursk, with Belgorod, Voronezh, Rostov, all of them constantly under attack, including Moscow and St. Petersburg. Now, Putin had to add an additional circle of air defense around Moscow. Was it like that in 2022? No. Then a lot of airports are not working. They have to cancel flights because of hundreds of Ukrainian drones and missiles that now travel inside Russia to demilitarize evil facilities. Then Russia had its Black Sea Fleet in Crimea. Now Russia does not have its Black Sea Fleet in Crimea because 60% of it is destroyed with Ukrainian homemade marine drones and Neptune missiles, and the leftovers escaped to Novorossiysk in Russia. So Russia lost that dominance in the Black Sea. Yes, they still have some missiles that they keep threatening the world with, but they are losing these positions. They've lost almost 1 million soldiers and gained less than 1% of the Ukrainian territory because most of their gains were back in 2014 and during these very first weeks of 2022. Since then, we may say that the front line is standing. Nothing is changing apart from how many Russians lost. They destroyed their economy. We ruined at least 40% of their oil refineries, and Russia is not a competitive country. You do not buy Russian phones, Russian cars, as far as I'm aware. They can only sell you oil or gas. That's their main export. And now they had to ban export of gasoline because like 40% of oil refineries destroyed. And this is not something that you can restore. This is not just oil tanks or depots with what we began in 2024. In 2025, we ruined this industry in general. Lukoil, Gazprom, Rosneft, these are monsters, bulls of their economy, are announcing the collapse, are selling their foreign assets. They cannot control the inflation. And now, openly, the Central Bank of Russia, that is always lying, speaks about negative growth of their GDP in 2026. So I think it's pretty visible. You don't have to be patriotic Ukrainian to see it. Now Putin speaks about the need to spend more money on the defense of Russia, and for the first time, perhaps in the 21st century, he's actually right because he used to describe their attacks as defense, but now they literally need to defend themselves. And by the way, I've received a very emotional comment of that criminals call it Ritter on X when I shared the information that Moscow is now building another air defense circle around it. And what made him super disappointed, because that's the truth, that's the real problem of the Russian Federation, its size. In the previous wars, the Second and the Third World War, this big size of Russia saved it from the reach of bombs and other stuff, and they could literally hide something deep inside the Russian Federation or the Soviet Union or the Russian Empire and keep producing some military equipment. But now with drones, with operations like Spiderweb, all of Russia is vulnerable. They don't have enough air defense. They start prioritizing, they start building it around Moscow because that's the only city, or maybe St. Petersburg too, that's the only city that Putin cares about, and rich people live there, oligarchs live there, but the rest is vulnerable, and they actually take away that air defense from the strategic sites, like more oil refineries that will be destroyed.
Right.
Prices on gasoline inside Russia, queues, the fact that their greatest resort, Sochi, and also home to Putin's residence, is now closed. Literally, the airport was not working and people did not travel there. So, do you see any changes in how Russians feel compared to 2022? I do.
So the Russians now are, so how are the Russians feeling then now?
Well, I think they realized that they overestimated their army, their budget, that perhaps having one dictator for 25 years leads to the fact that he loses the grasp of the reality. And one of the main things that Russians love is this feeling of stability and control. And they actually give up all of their freedoms for the sake of control. They feel that this big man controls all of their unnaturally big country, and now they feel he doesn't. They see that Putin, the Kremlin, and Russia is losing control. And recently, their main problem on TV was the fact that the United States and the European Union did not get frightened with the tests of their new intercontinental ballistic missile. But no, why should we? Nobody is scared in Ukraine, and Putin knows that the moment he does that, he's done.
Yeah.
And he's very much afraid. He wants to leave. He hides in the bunkers. He surrounds Moscow with the circles of air defense. So he won't use nuclear weapons. But they are desperate because they see the world understands now that Russia is, I'm sorry for this quote, but Russia is a paper tiger. They see its vulnerability was exposed, lack of air defense, inability to protect their borders, inability to protect their airspace, inability to protect crucial for their economy, oil refining industry. All of that was exposed by Ukrainian army.
Yeah.
And now more and more people they see it. They stop listening to what Russian propagandists repeat because words do not matter when you see how oil refineries burn.
Right, right. And there was just a report a couple of days ago about a group of Russian soldiers that were surrendering, and the commander of that particular section of the army sent their FPV drones to kill them all instead of let them surrender. And that's
Yeah, there is an investigation that maybe I will speak more on my channel. I have to study the subject myself, but there is an investigation that lots of these minor unit commanders of the Russian army somehow send their soldiers in the deadly parts of these mid grinders because they lose people at a tremendous pace, and they do not report this for a couple of months to get their money.
right.
And then they say, oh, he was killed, but he was killed like 3 months before. And during that 3 months, they pretended they were just on a mission without connection. There are lots of very ugly things, starting with the way they treat civilians in Ukraine, but also finishing with the way they treat each other. There are tons of videos that prove that. There are tons of reports, and Putin himself is very much afraid of 1 million of his active soldiers that can return back to the Russian Federation.
He
And these
doesn't
are
want them.
criminals, killers, rapers who, for the first time in their life, have access to money.
Right,
So the thing is, he cannot end this war without the defeat of Russia
right.
because he does not have this plan. He does not know how to survive it. He does not know how to preserve his rule. So we should not hope that on this political or diplomatic level, Putin will agree to freeze the war or to negotiate. No, he cannot afford it, literally. So the only solution is to defeat him, and we are pretty good at doing that. Just like keep standing with us, do not betray us, and we'll do the job.
Yes, you are doing the job. It's very, very impressive from where I look. And
Thank you.
it is. I mean, and then someone else called and they wanted to know, there was a while back, there was some kind of a natural resources deal that looked like it was being made or did get made, and we haven't heard anything lately about that. And they wondered if you knew whether there was something happening or not with
Well,
the.
it was just like an agreement on rare earth minerals that
Mhm.
Ukraine has. But as far as I know, the White House has signed a lot of similar agreements with lots of different countries. And it is a very much future-oriented agreement
Mhm.
because it spoke about the resources that have to be investigated, like they exist, that's proven, but there is no access. So, like the United States will have access to the newly opened mines, and they have to be developed. And with the most optimistic approach, this will take 10 years or
Yeah.
something. And, a lot of people who support Ukraine, even from the United States, were worried that we can sell something for nothing and that we can be tricked. But in reality, the very text of this agreement is more about like plans about future because it will take years to start extracting these metals. But the thing with technology that maybe in 10 years you won't need it. There are a lot of metals that were used, for example, in the production of batteries. They were super necessary, and now a different metal is used. So just like, honestly, it was more perhaps about our eagerness to cooperate. That was the need to sign it to demonstrate that we are prepared to share the things we have. We are grateful for the things you share with us, like intelligence, but it's not something that will be or has already started.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Again, it's interesting.
Interesting is your word to
I
substitute
guess it is
literally
because I don't
everything.
even know what other, I mean, it's horrible. It's horrifying. Honestly, all of it. But it's like horrifying. I'm horrified with my own government right now as well.
I have a friend in England who told me that when they try something and something is not tasty, the polite English way to say is, "Oh, interesting." And in Ukraine, it's not the way. Like if we say interesting, we like me. Interesting. And I'm like, oh my God. So someone could say interesting to my, I don't know, dish, and I would say, ah, you like it, but you
Oh,
don't.
so what would you say if you didn't like it? Would you, how do you,
Something like, no, not bad.
not
Something like
bad,
that.
not
Not
bad.
bad. Unusual. How
Oh,
unusual.
different, very different, right?
Yeah. Yeah, something like that.
Unique. So the last question is someone
Mhm.
called and said they wanted, and this actually wasn't you and I had a brief conversation, a texting thing, but this is from someone else that wants to know if the people of Ukraine are feeling supported or betrayed or all of the above by the U.S. administration right now. Or
You tell me. You tell me.
well,
Like I don't want to repeat the mistake of JD Vance. Those of you who watched this meeting, the very first meeting with President Zelensky, when President Zelensky asked Vance if he had visited Ukraine, so he speaks about the situation in Ukraine, and he said, "But I watch stories, I watch reels, so I don't want to be like JD Vance.
I
I watch
know.
stories." I watch reels. I have never been to the United States.
Uh-huh.
And one thing that maybe we in Ukraine understand, and it may explain to you a lot, is that we never equate fully people of the country to the government of the country.
Mhm.
We've been in the situation when we needed, for example, the revolution of dignity because our people cared about freedom, respect, dignity, and President Yanukovych did not. So we never, I know, for example, a lot of people in Hungary who support Ukraine, who care for Ukraine, and Orban does not. But another thing that, as a Ukrainian, once again, I don't want to judge American politics as a Ukrainian, same as you cannot fully judge Ukrainian
Right.
politics being an American. But what I can tell you is that President Zelensky also promised to his electorate back in 2019 that he will end this war by talking with Putin because he knows how to talk. And they met in Paris, and that led to the full-scale invasion. Zelensky won the election because he promised this, and that's what people wanted. But now people, together with Zelensky, understand it's impossible to negotiate with Putin if his like task is to destroy Ukraine. He does not need new territories. All understand that. That's the largest country in the world with a very small GDP. Why do they need new territories? Come on, no. They just need to destroy Ukraine to substitute it with this Russian imperial myth to say that Ukrainians do not exist. And that democracy is impossible, on the territories of all the former Soviet Union. And one more thing is that no matter how hard some politicians in the United States may try to make friends with Russia or to make friends with China, that is impossible. No matter how much time and effort they will spend. Unfortunately, this leads to a lot of lost opportunities, lost lives, destroyed buildings. But they will come to this understanding because, first of all, China and Russia are very united and they share a lot, beginning from the communist ideology that is still very much present in Russia, that large territories, authoritarian style. And many actually say that a lot of things come to understanding when you look at Russia as a part of Asia, not a part of Europe, but part of this Asian social, political, hierarchical approach. But one thing that unites China and Russia most is their anti-Americanism.
Hmm.
All of their ideology, all of their internal communication, all of their propaganda is built on the description of bad America, bad West, bad Europe, and good Russia, good China, good India.
Hmm.
So sooner or later, they will return back to this orbit of normalcy. And this, I don't like to repeat after Russian propaganda, but this Western world, it has to stay together because once again, they are openly against us. And no matter what you offer them, you cannot become their friends because they are just waiting for a moment to stab you.
Well, I know that Russian state TV is amazing. I wish that more people would actually be able to tune in to see.
Critically, to watch it critically.
Yeah, because it's unbelievable, really, how much they do hate America and the West, and and it's very very blatant and very bold, and it's pretty shocking, really. But yeah, it's pretty shocking the things that are happening with our own as well. And I guess I would like to ask you. I would assume that you would like to encourage people in this country to not lay down, to stand up and continue to stand up against the sweeping tide of authoritarianism that is apparently coming our way very fast.
Yeah, because like from one point of view, you are very lucky. You live far away from, like, when I analyze Europe, I do realize that's a constant continent of constant wars. And a lot of people who actually left Europe, their old country, like old countries in Europe, they moved to the United States for peace, security, safety, and the support and the participation of the American Army of the United States in the Second World War was immensely important. But I do understand people who want to be far away from that all, who want to be isolated. But it's also because you had a lot of freedom and you were always an example of that freedom. Maybe, democracy is a word that is so often used in the Western Hemisphere, but that's something that nations like mine, once hidden behind the Iron Curtain, jealously observed. And when you have a lot of something, you stop valuing it and you think it cannot change, no one can take it from us. No. Another mistake, I sometimes feel it. I cannot say it's like, I cannot describe it with any like negative term, but many still think, oh, maybe Ukrainians or Belarus people or Lithuanians, those who were once in the Soviet Union, they are a little bit like barbarians. They are not exactly like us. That's why they are fighting so fiercely. That's why they are not afraid of nuclear weapons when we are. We value human life. No, we were just living closer to this epicenter of evil, which is Moscow. And the further you are from Moscow, the better you live. In Russia, it's a disaster. In Ukraine, it was more optimistic. In Poland, communism was even better. In some Balkan countries, it was even with private property. So it all changes depending on how far away you are from Moscow.
Mhm.
But protect your freedom, protect your democracy, because first of all, you were and are an example for a lot of nations that strive for that. Never underestimate it. Don't think it's a thing of the past. Second, please know that those people who want to be dictators, they also test the nation, same as Putin did. And you have years before they finalize their vision. They are constantly testing. And if they see, oh, that will give me a lot of problems, oh, I might lose these elections at the very beginning, they may step down.
Mhm.
Because if people keep observing, if people keep describing themselves as apolitical, and maybe it'll change, slowly they turn into Russia.
Yeah.
Of course, everything has to be within the rules and norms, but protect the things that you value, protect the things that are important for you, for your family, for your community, and then everything will be okay. Because, like, you are strong. I believe that everything will be okay with the American people, and we share a lot of things in common. But we are going through these turbulent times. That's difficult. But, like, dignity is important, freedom is important. Protect that.
So Anna, tell people where they can find you and what you're doing.
You can
How,
find me
and
in Ukraine.
we can go to Ukraine and find you.
Well, you can come and find me in Ukraine, and but also you can find me on YouTube, Anna from Ukraine. Also, I've launched one more channel, Anna Danilchuk. You will find the links from Anna from Ukraine, which actually surprisingly receives a lot of views. My videos there, like 250,000, and that was surprising for me. On X, on Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads. So you go to YouTube, you find Anna from Ukraine, very easy, and then you will get all the links if you prefer other social media platforms. And of course, together with Cindy Anna, you can find me from time to time.
I am so grateful for your time. I know that your time is rarely your own. I mean, you're very committed to so many things, and I'm so grateful that you will share some with us periodically when we can. I
I'm
really
always
thank you.
honored to be a part of your community, and that's the magic of the social media, by the way.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? So I will let you go and say thank you again. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
your time, and
Thank you.
again,
Thank you so much, and stay safe. Bye bye.
okay, bye bye.